Hello everyone, welcome to today's webinar. I'm Dr. Mary White, your facilitator. Today we've got a team of people who are here as experts in this topic, and we have a presentation which is going to be largely run by Michael Lawrance. Michael, I like the line and I have to use it. Michael was a sheep shearer turned occupational therapist, and he will say that's many years ago, but it's still a great introductory line. So Michael, Roscoe, McCord and Forbes Smith, and Forbes and I go back to the early 90s before we both had grey hair, is the third person on the panel. So briefly introducing the topic, they're going to talk about the automation of task demand information so that we know when people have had a musculoskeletal condition or a return to work program, we need to have a good understanding of what the actual jobs are, both for prevention and for post-injury care. So it's great to have the team along today to talk about their work, their very technical work and practical work in automation of task demand information. Michael is going to introduce the others in the team, Roscoe and Forbes, more formally in a few minutes and provide more information about himself other than the fact he was a shearer. On that note, Michael, it's a pleasure to hand over you to hear about automation of task demand information.
Thank you very much, Mary, and thank you for people taking the time to be here. And also I'll just move straight into introducing my colleagues. As Mary has kindly done, she's mentioned the three of us. We're all part of the Joint Action Group, a small entity that was put together some 15 to 20 years ago to address work-related musculoskeletal injury. And Roscoe particularly leads the technology development over the last 10 years and has developed with the team a methodology and piece of equipment which we think is useful in automating the analysis and reporting of task demands. But we'll get into more of that. We won't be talking about us and our what we have particularly this afternoon. That's not the purpose. It's to talk about the area where this sort of system and technology and automation may be helpful. Just a little bit more about the members of the team who are here with us this afternoon. So Dr. Forbes Smith has been a medical doctor for quite some time, but he'll tell you if you ask him that before he did that, he had a real job. And what he means by a real job is doing things where he was hands-on. Forbes has worked at sea in all sorts of ships, everything from fishing boats, if that's what I'm allowed to call them that, in the North Sea off Scotland, through to driving naval ships for the Royal Navy around the opposite part of the globe, and everything in between in merchant shipping. So an extraordinary wide experience there, and also, as Mary knows better than I, was a real pioneer in bringing a real focus into MSD prevention into Australia when we were lucky enough to have him here. Myself spent the first half of my working life bent over shearing sheep. Professional sheep shearers usually, almost always, do lots of other things because it's seasonal work, so that the list of jobs I had goes on forever because the seasonal work, I hope not because I was unemployable, and worked in lots and lots and lots of different industries, usually pretty hands-on, usually pretty heavy manual work, and just because of the nature of it, the ones where there tends to be a fair bit of hazard exposure, particularly to manual handling things, but lots of others, everything from high-rise inner city commercial construction through to remote sites, agricultural, mining, other sorts of work, forestry work, bushfire prevention and response, that sort of thing. And then a whole stint after doing some 15 years of occupational rehabilitation work, starting with Forbes and with various other entities, including my own business for quite a while. then moved into safety management, ergonomics, then safety management, and really started an apprenticeship all over again in underground safety management, where I was also responsible for injury management, so I've been at the other end of it as well. I might add that I also had personal experience of injury and recovery and redirection coming out of the shearing industry. Roscoe's a bit of a wizard, actually. He has a real background in audio-visual, but more particularly as it relates to the work we do together in software development. I don't even have the language to describe it properly, but Roscoe takes ideas that we have for doing things from a clinical and from a business and from a injury management, injury prevention, safety systems point of view, and turns them into software that makes the work easier to do, quicker, and a lot more affordable. There's an array of entities and people doing that sort of work these days. Our background is a little different. We came out of having actually been in industry and been in clinical roles where we were doing that, looking for equipment rather than trying to find a purpose for equipment. What I mean there is we were doing the work and then we automated it. A big thank you to the Australian mining industry who saw what we were doing, said it was good, but they needed to be able to leverage it and wanted to see whether we could automate some of what we were doing. They encouraged us with research and development grants, but more particularly support to work alongside them for testing concepts, for testing the equipment and as we built it. That's enough about us. We'll get into the meat of the presentation now. So we're going to go through 1, 2, 3, 4 chunks, if you like. Have a look at what's there now in return to work processes. Have a look at how the sort of equipment that we build may be useful. I think it is, but that's my view, our view. A case study to illustrate that, and then the important Q&A session, which I want to leave plenty of time for. So when running through this, I want to really emphasise that I'll be addressing what I think are barriers, some things that don't work so well in current return to work processes, but there's no criticism of any, I really mean this, I'm upfront if there is a criticism, but there's no criticism intended in talking about the problems we encounter. We're all part of this system. I believe the system is among the best globally and the best to date. And also we think it can get better and needs to get better. This session is providing some thought and some information on current work methods in injury management, claims management, return to work management, and how automated analysis and reporting systems may be of use in improving our work. This perspective that we give is a long-term perspective in the Australian work injury context and not intended to be jurisdictional, state or territory specific. We want to just say that there's expertise among the attendees and a great wealth of expertise in rehabilitation, return to work management, injury management and claims management. I'm not going to teach you to suck eggs. There's more than enough expertise in the room. My views personally are influenced by work injury and recovery personally and as an OC rehab provider with various entities, as I've mentioned, but also 30 years of experience in giving expert evidence regarding work injury. This does provide insight into when things go pear-shaped and the circumstances where rehabilitation, return to work, injury management and claims management has not worked as well as we'd want, and what contributes to this and what might be useful in changing it. And one of the mantras, if I may, that we use in our organisation is that change is possible. So firstly, looking at the current return to work processes. The existing processes provide a legal and administrative framework that's highly inefficient at times in practice. We all know that. I think I'm paraphrasing or misquoting Ash Barty when she sometimes addressed things as good or not good. So the good is that people have insurance cover if they're injured. Most places in the world don't, I believe. And also a process for treatment, recovery and resuming or regaining paid work. The not so good are the disconnections leading to many missed opportunities for injured people, for businesses and for insurance schemes. We'll get into that. There's several weaknesses. A slow recovery create unnecessary costs. There's communication barriers or disconnections, and these, in many people's experience, between workers, not just the injured workers, but the workers, the injured people, the frontline supervisors and managers, and I'll come back to them again and again, the frontline supervisors and managers. Also, and I know this varies enormously depending on the entity or the industry or how big or small the particular business is, but there's often a disconnect between work health and safety or occupational health and safety staff and return to work staff, and even with HR staff, depending on how the organisations run. And often surprisingly, I think that a really senior level, including CFOs who you think would be all over this, that sometimes they just don't seem to understand the mechanics of how some of the claims and injury management works. I know that varies enormously, but there's disconnections often between businesses, between insurance holders and insurer agents, and also, as you know better than I do, between the doctors and treaters and all of the above. It doesn't mean it's always like this. I'm not being negative, but I'm looking at what we see go wrong and to see where we may be able to contribute improvements. There's often, as you well know, can be conflict between productivity needs and injury management. And also, believe it or not, I believe between injury management and claims management. Just want to mention an experience of having worked for quite a while in underground mining, safety management, and there was a period, tragically, over a 2-year period, where quite a number of people in Australia died in mining. It was quite a spike, and it was very worrying. So that the mining companies, to their credit, gathered their senior people from all around the world, and they gathered in Brisbane. They came literally from the other side of the planet as well. Safety people were invited, but that was not their meeting. It was the CEO and GM and MD and all those important people. In the end, there was a panel at the end of the day, and one of the people on the panel, who represented one of the biggest employers of people in the mining industry, was asked, what would you do if you had to change one thing? And he said, I would outlaw lost time injury reporting. I'll just leave you with that. But coming out of that sector, it was a pretty interesting thing to say. So what are some of the things we encounter as problems in the current way we go about doing the work of return to work, injury management, claims management? There's repetition and administrative burden. Doctors issue multiple medical certificates with minimal new information at times. Employers and insurers spend, and include insurer agents there, spend time reconciling paperwork instead of focusing on recovery planning. Again, an anecdote from the mining industry: when working in an entity that was really financially challenged at one stage, it looked like it might not survive, and it did, fortunately, because of a lot of hard work by a lot of people. And distraction in an environment where you're dealing with explosives and some pretty serious chemicals, hazardous substances, on all the suite of hazards that you encounter in underground mining. That distraction and fatal risk are close cousins. To address this, the management, actually individually, all decided to get out of their offices and out into the workplace and be present and walk the work, be directly engaged at all the different levels. At the end of which, a really experienced mining general manager commented that if this is what we do when faced with a crisis, what are we doing the rest of the time? I mention that in the context of disconnection between the various entities. Excuse me, I've got to keep the voice working. There's often delayed and inconsistent information flow. Job task details and available modified duties information often reach the doctors, as you know, after restrictions are set, because the employer, and doesn't know anything about it till after the first medical certificate of capacity arrives. This timing gap results in overly conservative restrictions and unnecessary lost time. Information can be provided prior to or after reviews, and as you know, this leads to inconsistency. Another point is an over-reliance on the treating doctor. Yes, they're critical. Great that we've got a system there where the doctor does have the decision-making power, but doctors are positioned as the sole gatekeepers of work capacity, often with minimal information. Monthly reviews mean restrictions often remain broader than they are needed to be for weeks. Doctors frequently lack detailed knowledge of workplace tasks, and why should they know about the workplace? Another point is there's ambiguity in employer responsibilities. Employers are told they must comply with restrictions, but also need to proactively provide suitable duties. Communication with doctors is framed as optional, sometimes causing variability in practice. There's disconnection at times with frontline operations and production managers. Once again, a little war story. I started work at a large car manufacturing plant. I'm just being careful here. And drove in. I started there as an occupational rehabilitation provider on night shift. There was a banner celebrating Mega Nil LTI as I drove in, just as an aside. There was 3 occupational rehabilitation provider entities on site 24/7. Walked in, was met by a production manager who literally sprayed my face, quite literally sprayed my face while shouting, "No more light duties." He was at his wit's end. So it was an interesting start. There's information gaps and there's trust and credibility gaps. I think that's what I was experiencing there. There's a lack of structured real-time coordination. The process is linear and document-driven at times. We need documents for records with little scope for real-time updates. The real-time updates is something where the automation, I think, can contribute. We'll come back to that. Rehabilitation providers and treating allied health professionals, their work is often not clearly integrated, as you well know. And I think it's key that informal feedback from frontline managers and supervisors, absolute key to this, informal feedback from frontline managers and supervisors about modified duties is rarely captured or fed back systematically. It is captured and it is fed back, but I think we can do better with that because I think it's critical. I think this is a real missed opportunity for risk minimisation as well as for return to work efficiency. And there's this inefficiency and worker impact. The workers are sidelined longer than necessary, as we often know. And often they're at work in name only, which while when looking at the insurance and claims and return to work management documentation, it could look like things are working. There can be a problem grumbling underneath that with a worker being there in name only, but there's irritation and resentment and alienation building up in all sorts of quarters. Employers struggle to match vague restrictions with specific tasks. Recovery becomes reactive and slow rather than proactive and supported, and I think the goal is proactive and supported. So how do we address this? Moving to the second of our 3 parts. And I'll pick up the pace a little bit. So I won't talk to what's on the screen visually, but that is part of the system which is automated, one of, and we can address questions about that as you wish in the Q&A session, which I must leave plenty of time for. So this is the only mention of our product in that context, but there's others out there that do similar or same and do it in different ways. We believe we do it really well, but that's for you to decide if you want to at any time in the future. Anyway, this sort of system enables companies to assess musculoskeletal disorder risk for every task in the workplace, and you can emphasise every task. That's the game changer. Rather than treating jobs as a single block, we can granulate it and look at it by tasks. By providing structured task-level risk insight, it resolves the pain points in the current process. Currently, we look at task demands libraries, and they're costly, cumbersome. As an occupational therapist and ergonomist, I've been asked too many times to build them. When Roscoe told me that our system could spit them out as a byproduct of what we do, it was one of the best bits of news I've ever heard. So task demands libraries, as traditionally done, can be costly, cumbersome, time-consuming, and often, I would say, usually out of date. There's a plethora of automated options emerging, but will they help? What will they do? So how can we make this better? How can we make this help happen? We need clarity and specificity. Each job is broken into its component tasks. Each task is assessed for contributing risk factors, which might sound a bit odd when we're talking about return to work and medical restrictions, but the light bulb moment is that they are connected, and we can make a lot better use of work-related risk analysis for manual tasks in people who are recovering and going back to work, whether they be going back to work from a work-related MSD or another physically restricting injury. So there might be contributing risk factors, for example, bending, forward twisting, load handling, and we can report on this from an injury prevention and a rehab and return to work point of view. This allows precise matching of duties to medical restrictions, and that's the goal. That's what we're after. So looking beyond task demands, physical task demands provide information broadly describing physical actions, as they should, physical movement actions and postures, regarding how physically hard the work is, and that's a pretty vague term, but not information regarding risk of injury contributing factors, which can also be applied to risk of injury recovery. What might impede injury recovery or set it back? We can move to proactive communication. Employers can share accurate task-based demands with doctors at the first consultation, avoiding delays and conservative assumptions. Doctors want patient to come with an agreed return to work plan between the worker and the business, the return to work coordinator. They see their role as to provide the coordinator with a report of potential suitable duties. The doctor doesn't see themselves as an expert of what goes on in every workplace, as you well know. Doctors don't want to be dealing with conflict between the worker and the return to work coordinator. They don't want long reports and videos to look at to try and figure out what work is suitable. Takeaways are the task analysis data or list of possible alternate duties that the coordinator can access from the task library gives them valuable, accurate information to discuss with the worker. A return to work plan agreed between the return to work coordinator and the worker, provided by the worker to the treating doctor, gives them, the doctor, confidence to sign off or to discuss any medical issues that the worker may have, given that the worker thinks they can do the task. The doctor might have some other views to address with the worker, but based on good, solid, credible information about what the work is. So alternative duties shortlisted. When restrictions are set, for example, no forward bending, automatically identifies safe tasks and flags unsuitable duties. I'll go through that again. What we want is restrictions able to be set which automatically identify safe tasks and flag unsuitable ones. So we're talking in terms of risk of setting back or impeding recovery and the return to work plan progression. Also new injury or re-injury, because people are at risk of that when coming back, as you know. So risk control and validation. So I'm talking about risk of work-related musculoskeletal disorder, but that's joined at the hip to physical task demands. Physical task demands, I'm not talking about risk, but there is a synergy and a connection there, which I don't think we've made a lot of use of today. High-risk tasks can be targeted for ergonomic or process redesign. Once controls are applied, the tasks are retested to validate the injury risk. Importantly, the system enables continuous assessment of tasks across the organisation, driving down risk over time across the organisation, not just for the return to work task. Unsuitable tasks may be reported. Task assessment or risk control. Sorry, I lost it there. The game changer for production and operations managers is that they can make quick and cost-benefit analysis investigations for both return to work and for injury prevention. So that's a key point. The game changer is that the same automated system can give valuable, accessible and affordable information regarding return to work and injury prevention. I won't talk through all the words up on the little wheel up on the screen. You know the territory well. It's just to illustrate that there's a lot of players and factors and influences involved here. And I think there's a real opportunity for making use of the new technology, the new systems to beef up, improve how return to work management takes into account the biopsychosocial elements. And not think about injury risk prevention and return to work separately, but to look at injury risk prevention, to re-injury risk, and injury recovery protection for the person who's injured, for the workforce around them. That's not a small thing, because you can have lots of modified duties and you can be spilling some risk away from the injured person to the other uninjured workers. And for the employer and for the insurers. I think there's a real opportunity there to start thinking in terms of managing risk for those who aren't injured, for the person who is injured, and doing it in a more integrated way. Real-time updates help this. Instead of relying on monthly reviews, this can be done dynamically. It can be done quickly. And I won't get into the weeds of that now. We don't have the time. But the game changer is you can assess every task really quickly for a few dollars rather than many hours and many, many dollars. Then there's consistency across cases. There's some objectivity comes into the data and analysis and reporting. Structured reporting ensures that every doctor, insurer and employer receives the same clear information, reducing that variability. The way it can be done, it allows for real participation for workers' engagement. They can see on the screen as you're doing gathering the information, analysing it and presenting the reports that would go to their doctor. The workers can see a clear pathway back to safe duties, improving confidence and recovery. Okay, into the last of the three bits before the Q&A, which is the fourth bit, but the case study. Trying to think about how this works to illustrate this to you. But mentioning again, a current process would be, a traditional process would be a worker reports back injury after, let's say, a lifting episode. The doctor issues a certificate saying no lifting over 5 kilograms and avoid bending. I'm mindful of a particular surgeon I used to see work capacity certificates from, and on every one of them, I swear, was written no lifting or crowbars or shovels, regardless of what the work was. And what does avoid bending mean? What does avoid bending mean? Does it mean big bending or little bending or all bending? It's just so vague, it's hard to work with. The employer is unsure which tasks fit the restriction and leaves the worker on cautious light duties, initiating dissatisfaction for the injured person, for the frontline managers and for their peers. After 4 weeks, the doctor reviews again. Restrictions are eased slightly, but by now the worker has lost engagement and confidence. And this is a critical juncture that I see with those that turn up in court cases where you see pathways like this where it probably could have been arrested at that point, and I'm sure many are, but I tend to see the ones that aren't. and I really think there's opportunity for improvement there. New processes, for example, with what we've got. I'm just going to run a little video there so you can see some of that in action. So this is a typical use of the tool for doing, and out of that will come various reports, including task demands and key contributing risk factors by body region and movement. The worker reports back pain after lifting. And one of the mantras in underground mining that I was taught was bad news never killed anyone, withholding bad news can. So early reporting would be really handy. Early proactive reporting. Unfortunately, this can conflict with my mob, people who manage work health and safety, occupational health and safety, and an obsession with LTI counts. We really need to get better at that so that we have systems where early reporting is the norm. Employer immediately consults the task demands and work-related MSD risk library. I emphasise this is not only going to be useful for work-related MSD type injuries. For example, it might be a fracture or a laceration, but the task demands is just as relevant, and the risk library which works with that can be useful in a way we haven't used it before. And it might show that picking from low shelves and forward bending has a high risk score, but packing tasks that is got low load and moderate twist is low risk, and inventory scanning has minimal risk. So we can get into the detail of that in the Q&A if you like, but it's the availability of accurate, detailed information to feed into the system can be a game changer. So the new process, with this new process, an employer could provide this structured task-based risk profile to the doctor before consultation if it was paralleled with early reporting. It'd be task-based rather than talking about the whole job. That'd be more granulated and useful. It would provide task physical demands, and it would also provide manual task risk factors by body region, movement, action and posture in a very clear, simple and easily absorbed way. The doctor reviews the restrictions against the detailed task risk and approves the worker for modified duties. Might say safe inventory scanning, light packing great, avoid shelf picking and lifting tasks rather than avoid bending. I'll go over that again. So rather than having something where the employer is just gets something that says avoid bending, and I for one wouldn't know what to do with that, they might get back based on their own real jobs listed saying this one's in, this one's out. For example, inventory's in, shelf picking's out. A new approach would allow the risk of impeding recovery to be managed, which is what task medical restrictions are about. So it's the risk of impeding recovery that we will need to manage there. We need to turn this on its head to think about return to work duties as proactive, therapeutic activity aligned with treatment. Think about that. So instead of it being always about restriction and what doesn't work, with the use of automation making things more accessible in time and dollars, the duties that are available might be able to be used in a therapeutic way to aid recovery and speed recovery. And this is based on something that we are zealots about, and that is that manual handling can be healthy. Yeah? Manual handling per se is not unhealthy. In fact, moving our bodies is a need and loading our bodies is a need, but it's how it's done and when it's done and in what doses it's done. That's where this system can help a lot. So the key contributing risk factors up there is just up to illustrate the sort of information that's readily and available at blinding speed, believe it or not, with the automated systems. But I won't get into the detail of that. Once again, Q&A if you want to, but this is really useful information. And using it properly, aligned with the physical task demands for return to work purposes, we believe can be a real help in workers returning to meaningful duties in days, not weeks. This new process with products like ours allows return to work to better address all biopsychosocial elements, which align, strangely enough, with the risk factors for work-related MSD. And once again, it's not just for return to work managers, it's for injury risk prevention, it's for re-injury risk prevention, and it's for the whole recovery family, if you like, of the injured person, the workforce, the employer and the insurers. The new process, high-risk tasks such as shelf picking are redesigned with improved work practices and task modifications, and this is a key point in thinking about return to work management and choosing suitable duties and managing risk as components of the same needs, really. We can think about how to reduce the risk across the workforce rather than just simply adhering to the medical restrictions on a work capacity certificate. Because too often, I think, only addressing them on a individual by individual basis, we are not reducing the risk sufficiently, in fact sometimes pushing risk away from the injured person to other people in the workforce. I think we need to think beyond that, working at an individual level, and look at it across the workforce at the same time. So high-risk tasks such as shelf picking are redesigned to improve work practice and task modifications. These tasks are retested using the system, which can be done easily, quickly, and at almost zero cost. Ongoing monitoring allows the risk to remain low and improvements to benefit the entire workforce. The new process with products like ours, progress updates feed back into the system, helping the doctor and employer efficiently expand duties to match recovery. What we're talking about there is that if you have a system which is on high repeat, really doing risk analysis of manual tasks, it allows your library to be data rich, and you can pluck out of it whatever you need at any time very quickly and easily and cheaply, and feed that to the doctor straight away. The outcomes are workers stay engaged and active. They can be part of doing this assessment. You don't need to bring in OTs and physios and ergonomists and or even return to work coordinators. You can have other people in the workforce doing the assessment and bringing the information into your system for you, the return to work coordinator, to manage. And in doing so, they can become really involved in managing the problem. The worker stays engaged and active. You can have the injured person out there doing the risk assessments and reporting that gives you the task demands reports. Have them doing the task demands library rather than bringing in an OT or an ergo like me. The outcome is recovery is faster and safer. It's targeted. The employer reduces lost productivity and compensation costs, which is a bit of a motherhood statement, but it's what we're all trying to do alongside managing a person's injury and their recovery. Workplace risk is systematically minimised, and that's what we often haven't done, and continually monitored, which also we often haven't done for all workers, driving to safer long-term outcomes. And in conclusion, I'd just like to say that by shifting from the job level to the task-based model, I know I've said let's look at the whole workplace, but rather than saying a brickies labourer or a forklift driver or a packer has a particular set of problems, if we have the ability now to assess tasks and repeat assess them to build up really useful information and a data bank which can be reported on automatically at blinding speed, we are moving to a task-based model and embedding continuous risk control and validation. and I will leave you to read the rest of what's on the screen because I don't believe in talking through what's already up there for you to read. And on that note, I will hand back to Mary to run the Q&A session.
Thanks, Michael. And please, everyone, type in any questions you may have into the Q&A box. I have a few to start with, Michael, and the team, and Michael's going to suggest who is the best person to be answering any specific questions we may have. Michael, can you give me some practical information? Like, let's just say I'm running a company of 300 people and we've got a manufacturing environment and I want to go down this path. How does it actually work? Do you, is it like you come out for a week or two to set up and then you come back and check on it? How does it sort of fit together? That's one question. What equipment and what do workers think of it?
Can I ask Roscoe to answer the first two of those, and I'll answer what the workers think of it, part of it.
Roscoe is on mute.
I'll unmute myself. There we are.
Thanks.
Apologies. Yeah, so there are several different ways to do it, but essentially the ideal scenario that we think is that a company or an organization has their own kits and runs this themselves. And so rather than just being a one-off, get us on site, assess the tasks and go away, okay, we've got our assessments. One of the key points is continual assessment, as in that way your task library stays up to date because tasks change, equipment changes, people change, as in different employees and what have you. And because it doesn't require experts actually to do the assessments that you literally can do, as in, so we've got customers doing 5,000 assessments a month. That's across Australia wide, obviously. But the upshot of that is, at any given time, you've got a very good insight onto where your highest risk things are coming from. And then when they do propose controls, as in say, okay, they've identified, well, these are our highest risk tasks. Let's see if we can actually do something about them by following the hierarchy of controls. And so they can propose controls to those tasks, maybe even mock them up. So if they involve spending money or what have you, you can actually mock up the changes to actually validate whether it is actually reducing the risk. As in, so there's one portion of it. And then once they say, okay, well, this turns out that risk control is actually not very effective at all, and this one is actually really good. And then you say, well, okay, let's test this out throughout our sites or throughout our organisation, and actually maintain that it's actually reducing the risk. And then you can you say, well, at that site, there's no reduction in risk. Let's look into detail there. Similarly, that can be an alert, as in if you've got one place has got a certain risk profile for a task, and then another site has got a significantly different. It's again a flag to say, well, let's look at what's going on there to try and to look at it to get into it.
So there's a learning curve companies have to go through to get the best value from it and how to use it most effectively.
Yeah, I mean, certainly it's the more you use it, the more value you get from it. Certainly, if when you first get it straight away, if you've just had some injuries, those are the tasks you're going to start with. I mean, it makes sense to do that. But you can stop at that, as in, so it's still useful, as in you totally can say, well, get an external consultant like us or someone else on site, assess everything, and then you get an idea of, and then you at least target your actual your risk control expenditure, at least in a systematic way. But it's missing out on the true value of the really quick and low cost assessments, because it enables a few things that just aren't possible if you're getting an ergonomist on site doing it. You can't do thousands of assessments a month. It's cost prohibitive and time prohibitive. Whereas if you're doing it with the automated way, suddenly you can. And again, so then you've got the task profiles for your return to work matters, so you can get very detailed. And it's anyways, that's more or less it.
Thanks, Roscoe.
Forbes, could I, Mary, just to answer the second part of that, I'll start off. Forbes, would you mind unmuting, because I might throw to you if you don't mind. But I just, while to answer the second bit of the question, the third bit really about whether one of the mantras in ergonomics is participation, or consultation in work health and safety, worker engagement in return to work management. It's not just we think. Observation has been that if people understand, and they understand pretty quickly, that what we're on about is the task, not the person. We're not picking on anybody. We're not intruding on any privacy matters. Everything is kept confidential. Faces are blurred. There's all those sort of things. But the wow factor for people who can visually interact with the risk assessment of their own work that they do and see the results and see the report immediately is that they just buy in. They buy it again and again. And I want to just throw to Forbes, if you don't mind, just reminding us of an early, when we worked with a drilling company, when we took a whole lot of frontline supervisors into a mine site and spent a day with them, and what happened there.
It's one of the, it was incredible and left a lasting impression. For any return to work or injury prevention program, I think Mary would agree that it's never going to work unless the workers are involved. In this little scenario, we went to this drilling, deep core drilling, a mining drilling company, and showed them, did the analysis, did a video analysis back then. In those days, it wasn't automated as it is now. We then went back after Michael analysed that video and went back to show these team leaders of this company and show them the videos as to what could be done. Within seconds, we became irrelevant. And these people were throwing ideas at how it could be done. They could move this fulcrum a metre that way or a metre the other way. And they were literally massively engaged, hugely engaged in this process, so that what we do is provide them with valid information, and the workers then can find the solution, or they can throw ideas that solve the problem, which is exactly what happened here. So the idea that Mary was saying are the workers involved, yes, they are. We've had other examples of that more recently in a very big abattoir, again with team leaders, and one put our wearable sensor on, and after a while they all wanted to be part of it, and they said, oh, can we do this? Can I do that? Can I do the next thing? Oh, we could do this, we could do that. So in answer to the question, this does, the technology does engage the workers in a massive way. We have multiple examples of that.
Thanks, Forbes, and that's your claim to fame, isn't it? We've got to involve people, that collaborative approach from which goes back decades in you. We've got a question from Celia, who says, would you see a model like this working for psychosocial risk identification and communication to GPs?
Wow, that's a leading question, and we're probably all going to try and jump in and answer that, but I'm going to ask Forbes, who's probably done more research on this than anyone else in the team. So Forbes, could you address this, please?
I didn't quite exactly get the question, sorry.
Yeah, so Celia asks, would you see a model like this working for psychosocial risk identification and communication to GPs?
Oh, okay. I've done a lot of research in psychosocial issues, you probably know, Mary, for many years now. There is global evidence now that determines that psychosocial hazards or risk is a significant contributing factor to musculoskeletal disorder. That is well known. It currently is a correlation, not a cause and effect, though there is a great deal of research beginning to explain the pathophysiology of that. I won't go into it. I think the the combination of psychosocial risk and physical MSD risk combined are very important factors to give to the general practitioner, as I have been, and of course as Mary has also been. And these things are extremely important. It's probably a time for a different session at a different time, but we are developing an AI platform that can integrate psychosocial risk as detailed, say, by a firm, Professor Jody Oakman's model, for example, just as one. There are 10, 20 or 30 or more of them. To integrate that into our MSD risk, ergonomic risk analysis. And yes, so it would be an important thing to provide to the general practitioner.
And I guess there'd be a lot of things you'd have to look at with that, like privacy and
Yes.
people's engagement, but a massive potential from it if you can do it well and engage people, because it's a real struggle at the moment. I think many employers are struggling with the whole prevention of psychosocial hazards.
Yep.
Yes, it's difficult. That'll be a big advance.
Yeah, I mean, I think as long as the data is anonymized, or like any you and I, where we came in with joint action with Michael over 17 years ago, that the basis of our model was the medical model, where the patient's history, of course, is critical and sacrosanct as far as the doctor's privacy is concerned. And that's been a focus of this company ever since our beginning. So that would be a patient going to their own doctor with confidential information.
Thank you. We don't have any other questions from the audience here, so I might bring things to a wrap and say thank you very much, Michael, Roscoe and Forbes. There are so many opportunities to improve things, and this is one of those. I mean, as a medical practitioner, I know that I struggle to understand job. You know, when you've got a patient there, it's really often quite difficult to understand the work and the demands of it, and you're often left without information. There's often a real dearth of information. You might get some return to work plan or some suitable duty plan, but it's often very hard to conceptualize that as a medical practitioner and what it means. So the opportunity to actually get objective information is a huge benefit in terms of the medical practitioner's mind, from my perspective. Thank you very much for sharing what you have been up to. It sounds like there's a lot of learnings and development that's gone on in the background to get to the point you're at. Hats off to you for the work you've done. And thanks on behalf of the audience for your presentation. And thanks everyone for joining us today, being in the audience.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary.
Much appreciated. Bye.